of Breaking Points, also of Crystal and Kyle, but she's on Breaking Points here, talking about a clip from Pod Save America, which revealed how badly the Biden campaign was behind when he finally agreed to drop out. And, there's a lot of fingers being pointed right now about why Kamala lost, about why the Democrats lost, about why Trump is now in control of three branches of government, basically, and we live in hell. And some people would point the finger at Joe Biden. Some people would point the finger at the Democratic Party, either saying that there should have been an active primary, there should have been Democrats stepping up to challenge Joe Biden to at least make sure that he's the best candidate, and others say that it was incumbent upon the Biden campaign to admit that he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to run this campaign, let alone for another 4 years, and he should have dropped out already. So, I mean, that's the kind of autopsy that's being done on the campaign post-election, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. Let's see what Crystal Ball has got for us.
God Save America Bros made a pretty stunning revelation. For Democrats, actually, it could have been so much worse. Here is John Favreau.
Joe Biden's decision to run for president again was a catastrophic mistake. It just was. And he and his inner circle, they refused to believe the polls. They refused to believe he was unpopular. They refused to acknowledge until very late that anyone could be upset about inflation. And they just kept telling us that his presidency was historic and it was the greatest economy ever. We just heard him again say that it's the greatest economy ever. Clearly, 70, 80% of voters don't believe that. They don't believe that about their own personal financial situation, but they just keep telling us that. And then after the debate, the Biden people told us that the polls were fine. And Biden was still the strongest candidate. They were privately telling reporters at the time that Kamala Harris couldn't win. So they were shivving Kamala Harris to reporters while they told everyone else, not a time for an open process, and his vice president can't win, so he's the strongest candidate. Then we find out, when the Biden campaign becomes the Harris campaign, that the Biden campaign's own internal polling, at the time when they were telling us he was the strongest candidate, showed that Donald Trump was going to win 400 electoral votes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke, right? This wasn't when he dropped out. This was before he dropped out.
That's what their own internal polling said.
400 electoral college votes. Do you understand what that looks like? With the actual results, Dems took a real shellacking, losing the Senate, almost certainly failing to win back the House.
Sanshiro Salai says, the number of conservative new media celebrities is terrifying. Why do you think you don't see the same number of progressive personalities? That's a great question. And I would point you to the phenomenon known as AstroTurf. Right, so AstroTurf is that stuff in football stadiums that they put on the field instead of grass. And when we talk about AstroTurfing, what we're talking about is a political movement that doesn't really get there on its own, or in this case, a content creator that doesn't necessarily get there on their own. A great example of this is Tim Pool. Tim Pool was being paid by Tenet Media that turned out to be a Russian operation. Now, I'm not saying this to claim that all conservative media is a is a Putin-run sort of phenomenon, but that there are billionaires, there are capitalists that would like another tax break, and they're going to get that tax break from Trump. So there's a fundamental contradiction in terms of the interest of the working class and the interest of the capitalist class. This is basic economics, right? In that you as a worker, your interests lie in getting paid the most amount of money for working the least amount of hours. Now, that's not to say that you're lazy, but that's just to say that you've got a life and you'd like to do other things. You'd like to have family. You'd like to have all this other stuff, right? So that's generally your interest, whereas your boss's interest is in the opposite way. That's why we say contradictory. This is the fundamental contradiction of capitalism. Your boss's interest is for you to work the most hours for the least amount of pay, so they can exploit you to your fullest. And, in that, having conservatives control the government is helpful to crushing unions, to keeping workers in their place, to making sure that there's a sharp cliff to fall off of and no social safety net to catch you, so that workers are motivated to, spend as much of their life as possible producing value for their bosses and getting paid the lowest amount the boss can get away with. So things like a minimum wage, which hasn't been changed in, I think, 20 years or more. Keeping that in place, keeping having either no minimum wage or keeping it as low as possible is in your, so that being said, right? People that are people that are supporting a fledgling podcast, a fledgling YouTube channel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if they're people with money, then they're likely to want to give to a podcast, give to a content creator that is going to help them keep their good deal in place. And they have a very good deal in place right now. It's basically a second Gilded Age. And it's going to get even better for the capitalist, worse for the worker under Trump.
But they kept it close enough that they probably live to fight another day.
Yeah, that's the main reason I think that there's more conservative new media celebrities, right? Like in the old days, media was a public service. Understand? A network got a broadcasting license, and they were responsible. They had a civic responsibility with that license to cover news events, to cover political events, to cover all this kind of stuff. And there was a hard separation between the advertisement department, the people selling the ads, and the editorial department, the people doing the news, which meant that they were trying to keep the the ass kissing to their sponsors from affecting their news. Now, obviously, that didn't happen entirely. Obviously, there's going to be some imperative. There's going to be some incentive for the network not to bite the hand that feeds them. But there was an informal wall put in place. You can see this in the film Network, right? In the way that the network ran in the beginning of the movie versus how the network ran in towards the end of the movie, where the advertising department got almost total control. But that's the difference between legacy media and new media. And so with this new media and with the advertising being a little bit less certain of a prospect of building a platform, you need oilers, you need investors. And if you have those investors, then you can get off the ground. If you don't, it's a difficult road to hoe. I know this myself. Sam Cedar can tell you this, right? Even successful political pundits, successful new media figures can tell you, how difficult and unsure of a path there is to gaining enough influence, to gaining enough momentum to actually support yourself, right? And so as a result, not as many people go into left-wing content creation, go into left-wing new media, which is very unsure, as go into right-wing new media, which generally has backers, which there's generally some wealthy person, if you're willing to, advocate on the behalf of capital, there's generally a capitalist willing to make that easier for you.
A Joe Biden 400 Electoral College vote defeat means Republicans at or close to a filibuster-proof supermajority in the Senate, a gigantic margin in the House. It means the Democratic Party completely burned to ashes with nothing but a post-apocalyptic landscape remaining. The mandate and the power of Trump's Republican Party would be unmatched, not even close, in modern politics. After all, Reagan still had to contend with the Democratic House, even as he notched landslide Electoral College victories. The 400 Electoral College vote revelation is important, though, for a number of reasons. First of all, obviously, an indictment of Joe Biden himself, whose legacy is now genocide plus ushering an unrestrained Trump back into the White House. The arrogance and delusion of this man is truly stunning. It's also, clearly, an absolute indictment of every single party official and elite who circled the wagons to keep Joe Biden in the race and to prohibit any sort of real Democratic primary. You people claimed you thought Trump was an existential threat. You sure as shit didn't act like it, did you? Instead, you marched delusionally forward, claiming the president in a clear state of advanced decline was really a secret political genius. But this alternative timeline, 400 electoral college vote defeat, is also a potential forecast of what could come should the Democratic Party not make a dramatic turn now. Because
let me see if I can find you a chart of United States political parties, right? But a lot of people assume that since there's Democratic and Republican candidates, and there's other parties too, but those are the two main ones. Those are the two viable ones. Some people assume that that's how it's been since time immemorial. That's not true. That's not true. We started off in a system with no political parties, with a president who advocated against doing political parties. Very quickly, the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist Party, actually before then, it's kind of like the Tories and the sort of the holdovers from the British. Anyway, it's complicated. Let me see if I can find the graph to show you. But yeah, there's been the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. There were the Know-Nothings. There have been times even when it wasn't really like a two-party system, where there were more parties, more major parties. Even look back to like 1992, right? You had a billionaire who decided to run as a third-party candidate and may have swung the election towards Democrats. Really strange figure named Ross Perot. If you think Ron Paul is weird, check out Ross Perot, because he's incredibly weird. And his presence in the election, actually, he was winning the election at some point. Ross Perot was ahead of the Republicans and the Democrats, because people even back in 92 were kind of tired of the two-party system. He dropped out of the race and then dropped back in, and that's probably why he didn't end up winning. But it's hypothesized that he drew more from Bush than he did from Clinton, and that's why maybe Clinton won.
As bad as this election was, Democrats haven't even come close.
Is the Green Party the most progressive third party in the U.S.? No, the Green Party is not, as far as I know, an anti-capitalist party. And the current Green Party isn't even the same Green Party as the original Green Party, which started with Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader was a consumer advocate from the 60s and 70s, and started the Green Party. His effort did not succeed. Then later, it was restarted by Howie Hawkins and Jill Stein, and that's the current Green Party. But the Green Party in the United States of America has nothing to do with Green parties across the world, right? It's a separate thing. And, although I can see as a single issue, climate change is a pretty important one, it's not, it doesn't declare itself as a party as an anti-capitalist party. So no, it's not the farthest left by far, right? Leftism, when we talk about leftism, a lot of people don't know what that means. They just mean like, oh yeah, leftism, you're kind of like on the left of things. Well, that's misleading in the United States. The United States is Overton window, which is the spectrum of political viewpoints that are seen as acceptable in American, taken seriously in American discourses. It's artificially truncated because the United States fought a Cold War against the Soviet Union. And because of this and the Red Scares that happened, where essentially freedom of speech was ignored and actual left parties were prosecuted, you have a big gap missing on the left side. And you have a Republican Party that is in any other, in any other nation would be considered a far right party, as the establishment right party. So essentially what you have in the United States is two capitalist parties running against each other. Now, leftism, at the bare minimum, requires an anti-capitalist disposition. As far as I know, the Greens don't have that, and so there's a lot of parties that are to the left of the Greens. Now, I'm not saying I'm not endorsing or detracting from any of those parties in specific, and I think that if we get down into the minor third parties of the U.S., we'll get mired in that, right? But as far as what the furthest left party is, it's definitely not the Greens.
To hitting rock bottom. Dems saw dramatic shifts against them among Latino men and Gen Z young men in particular. The class divide was quite stark. Harris won voters earning over 100K and Trump won those earning under 100K. Kamala lost ground among voters of color of all education levels.
Okay, now notice, look at these graphs before, right there, you're gonna see they describe the trends, right? 2024, 2020, and 2016. And so here we see 18 to 29 years old. Now, if you'd been listening to the media report about voting trends and not really paying attention, you might be under the impression that that young people solidly endorse Trump. That's not true. But what is true is that more young people voted for Biden than voted for Clinton, and more young people voted for Biden or Clinton than voted for Harris. So the trend is going towards Trump. That's what that means. We still see, if you want to find Trump's best demographic. Oh, look at this. This is interesting. Trump's best demographic used to be 45 to 64 years old in 2016. And it is actually currently, again, 2020. It's a little different. I guess you have an octogenarian running against Trump, and I don't know what's behind this, right? But yeah, 30 to 44 still supporting Democrats. When you get to 45 to 64, you're looking at Trump support. Now, one exception is 2020, right? But in general, this is where Trump this is his best age group, 45 to 64. Would these be like some Gen Xers and some boomers, I guess, right? And then 65 years and older, that was solid for Trump in 2016, less solid for Trump in 2020. And look at this. 2024, it's tied. So Trump actually lost support amongst that 65 or older, the true boomer demographic here.
Levels. And what's more, there is absolutely no reason to think that any of these shifts and realignments are complete or that Democrats have found their actual floor. It is entirely possible that the 400 Electoral College defeat is where the presently constituted Democrats are headed, and fast. Just think about it.
Yeah, so I would disagree. I would agree with Crystal. I would agree with Crystal that this could be prophetic. That if the Democratic Party continues to ignore workers, continues to ignore material conditions, continues to fail to live up to their end of the bargain in the New Deal, then you're going to see worse results for Democrats.
Pretty simply.
And that's not to say that the Republicans are offering working people anything towards their material conditions, because they're not. They want to raise taxes on workers through tariffs, and they want to lower taxes on the mega wealthy through tax cuts. So they're not offering anything good for workers, and legitimately, people would be better off under Democrats. However, when you fail to draw when you fail to heighten the contradictions between the two parties, you get into a situation where you're just not offering workers enough for them to notice, for them to see, for them to recognize. What they recognize is that you're supposed to be the party of workers, and you seem like the party of elites.
Roughly speaking, only about a third of the adult population has college degrees. Massachusetts actually has the highest percent of college grads in the country, and even there, college graduates do not comprise a majority of the adult population.
I don't know what she's trying to suggest here, but I want to point out that being a college graduate does not make you part of the capitalist class, part of the bourgeois class. Being even a member of the professional managerial class does not make you bourgeois, right? These are still workers, up until the point that you control the means of production. You're a worker. However, people in the PMC are more likely to see their class interest as aligning with capital than than people who don't have degrees, don't have advanced degrees, get paid less, et cetera, et cetera.
This leads to a pretty simple conclusion. If non-college educated voters continue fleeing the Democratic Party, that party is cooked, relegated to a powerless, permanent minority party status. There is nothing written in law or nature that requires the country to be an evenly divided, roughly 50-50 split. In our own country's history, we can see periods of disproportionate one-party dominance. And no one should fool themselves either about the measures fully empowered Republicans with a stacked Supreme Court would take to ensure that the Democratic Party could never meaningfully
being a college graduate, means that you're worse than broke.
Fully compete again. Trump just won on a genuinely anti-democratic message, after all. He literally called for abolishing the Constitution, acting as a dictator on day one. Supreme Court has granted him immunity for all official actions. And Republicans have a clear roadmap to follow in the program of Hungary's Viktor Orban, where he has used the veneer of democracy to successfully permanently entrench his own regime. Before a stunning landslide victory, Orban described.
So what the Republicans saw before them, what Steve Bannon saw before him, was a country that was slipping away, demographics that were slipping away. Younger voters were against them. Demographics that were increasing were against them. And what he needed to do was secure enough of the vote, secure enough of the power, secure three branches of government in order to kind of codify the dominance of the Republican Party. And it's a really easy thing to do. The United States was made, the Union was forged by giving extra power to smaller, less populous slaveholding states in order to make them feel safe and make them feel secure, that even though the majority of the people did not live in those states, that those states would have essentially like a boost. The vote would be weighted towards those states. This is true in the Electoral College. This is true in the Senate. These are the anti-majoritarian aspects of the American government. So that's already there. And what Bannon and Trump are going to try to do now is to increase the anti-majoritarian nature of the government and try to, codify that. I mean, through things like gerrymandering, through things like suppressing the vote, especially the way that the Republicans suppress the vote, where it's they suppress preferentially the vote of demographics that vote against them, and of course the judicial branch, which if you nominate young Supreme Court justices, you can hold power in the judicial branch for a generation. And
it was so peaceful up here, but now there are freaking communist invading radicals.
We are likely to see a Supreme Court soon in which the majority of the justices
but now there are freaking
will have been named not just by Republicans, which we already have. We already have a 6-3 majority of justices named by Republicans to justices that are named by Democrats, but you're going to have a majority of the Supreme Court named by Trump. Named by Trump.
It was so peaceful up here, but now there are freaking communists
had effectively gained permanent control of a so-called democracy, saying, quote, "It was enough to win just once but decisively, that was the way. Now, Republicans may be one more cycle with this level of realignment away from winning just such a crushing victory. Now, as the initial shock of Kamala's loss wears off, don't be surprised if the Democratic consultant establishment and donor classes begin to quickly reassert themselves and claim there's no real need for a course correction, let alone a dramatic overhaul. It's already happening, in fact. That's what the Bernie versus Pelosi fight we covered earlier is all about. Just listen to Jim Clyburn, the man most responsible for propping up Biden and putting Kamala on the ticket, saying, there's no point in playing the blame game, right, guys?
I just think that as we take an assessment of all of this, we ought to just chill out for a while, get in touch with each other. Don't worry about blaming anybody. You know what they say, success has 1,000 parents. Failure is an orphan. And so when you're really successful, everybody claims credit. When you come up short, everybody seems to scatter and assign blame. I think that all of us will be taking stock of exactly where we are as a party, what happened in this election, and then go from there. I don't want this election to define how we go about treating candidates of color or candidates who may be women. I think we all just take stock of who and what we are and not get caught up in pointing fingers and assigning blame.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it would be a tragedy if the lesson that was learned from the Harris and the Clinton campaign was that you can't run women, especially women of color. And that's not out of the realm of possibility, right? There's enough kind of compartmentalization in the consciousness of the Democratic Party establishment to, you already see the language of we've got to appeal to the working class white voter, neglecting the fact that the working class is disproportionately made up of voters who are not white. So there's already that potential for that sort of compartmentalization. What I mean is like, on one hand being like, oh yeah, we're anti-racist, we're anti-misogynistic, but the American people will never vote for a black woman, right? That's what I mean by compartmentalized thinking. It's set in different you got mutually exclusive points of view operating at the same time, and while you're saying one thing, you're acting in another way. That's so the Democratic Party already has that potential, already has shown that propensity. You definitely don't want people making that kind of conclusion as far as political candidates, but at the same time, what Crystal's calling Clyburn out is that he's saying don't point the finger because the Democratic establishment is the one to blame, and he's part of that establishment.
Yes, I'm quite sure that Jim Clyburn does not want finger pointing because a good number of those fingers would be pointed right at him. Absolutely incredible. You're going to hear a lot of it, though. You're going to hear, it wasn't really so bad. Look at the 3 battleground states. Trump only won by a narrow margin, and almost all of the swing state Democrats kept their seats. These types will point to the losses suffered by incumbent parties globally, and they'll say, see, we just were facing really tough headwinds, guys. It wasn't really our fault. They'll offer some limited critiques of some small ball tactics. Hey, Kamala should have gone on with Joe Rogan. They'll invent things completely, like claiming Kamala was too woke when she spent the entire campaign studiously avoiding wokeness. Or they'll blame a singular individual like Biden or Pelosi or Kamala herself, not depending on merit, but depending on their own intra-party tribal affiliations. Now, in a sense, these critiques have merit. It was close in the industrial Midwest after all. I think it is plausible to imagine maybe a Gavin Newsom, maybe Mayor Pete, or even Big Gretch could have pulled off the election victory. The exact place where Dems find themselves today is still in the ballgame enough that it is conceivable some small adjustment could have been sufficient to win this particular election. The current status of the Democratic Party isn't a complete catastrophe. But make no mistake, the long-term trajectory is death. If the trends that the party saw between 2016 and now continue unmitigated, it will be utterly catastrophic in a way that is probably unrecoverable. Now, after Hillary lost in 2016, Democrats had a chance to actually learn some real lessons about their abandonment of working people, to see the writing on the wall about their future electoral prospects. Instead, they chose denial. It was sexism. It was Comey. It was Russia. Hillary herself, self-interested in blame shifting, of course, led the charge. Biden's extremely narrow victory was taken as vindication. But once again, the alarm bells were ringing. The continued shift of Latinos towards Trump, the widening of the education divide, the fact that Biden was barely able to win while Trump was literally getting people killed in the middle of a pandemic. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement for the Democratic Party. Do not underestimate that party's desire and self-interest in once again learning nothing and changing nothing. Just think about it. Kamala's campaign was a...
Yeah, the irony is that you've got Clyburn saying, don't point any fingers, right? But at the same time, you've got other Democratic Party officials pointing fingers at marginalized groups that the Democratic Party has ignored, that weren't part of the campaign. I mean, you've already seen a cave-in on immigration under Biden, and, you know, you've seen this rubber stamped by the Harris campaign. Now they're working on a, like blaming wokeness essentially for the loss and turning into an anti-woke party, a la, let's say, the Labor Party. Let's talk about the, Keir Starmer and the disposition of the Labor Party towards trans people in the UK, right? That's where, and it's really just anything to save the skins of the party officials, the loser liberals that have been losing ever since the late 80s, that are scared of their own shadow, scared to embrace the New Deal social contract signed by FDR. And honestly, that is the only thing that was holding the Democratic Party up. That is the only thing that allowed the Democratic Party to move forward on social issues.
But now there are freaking communist invading radicals.
Look at LBJ and look at the progress that was made under LBJ as far as the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. Right now, like, obviously with the caveat that LBJ also was the, biggest backer of the bloodiest epic of the bloodiest, part of the Vietnam War. And that's what ultimately ended up dooming his candidacy and the candidacy of any Democrat, right? But when the Democratic Party succeeds, it's a combination of worker-focused programs with social progress. And that social progress is only possible while the Democratic Party is keeping good on its deal with workers. Otherwise, you end up in situations where the demagoguery and the demonization that the Republican Party is constantly doing. Remember that that campaign ad? She's not for you. She's for they, them. Right? So now they're blaming trans people, but it might as well be any marginalized group. This is always the Republican Party's strategy. Going back to Reagan. Reagan would make white people afraid of the welfare queen, and he didn't even have to say that the welfare queen that he was describing was black, because these voters already had that image in their mind. And while you couldn't take away it's almost like you couldn't take away social programs without implying that they were going to the wrong people. Without dividing and conquering. That is the Republicans' constant strategy. And so, the Democrats have just fallen off of their strategy of that has worked, and it allows the Republicans a chance to come in. That in combination with the fact that they don't support workers, they don't support unions, they don't support a minimum wage, they don't support Medicare for all. Remember all the things that Kamala Harris was forced to disavow to be seen as a candidate who could succeed?
Multi-billion-dollar industry. Consultants received multi-million-dollar contracts. The checks cashed whether those ads worked or not. The DNC, it's a cartel, protects its chosen consultants and allied politicians. CNN and MSNBC exist to carry the establishment party line. It's a racket. And it won't be disrupted by a few establishment types meekly whispering, you know what, guys? Maybe Bernie was right. So for anyone who is left of MAGA, for my libs and my lefties alike, we gotta be crystal clear about a few critical things. Number one, third parties are a waste of frickin' time and energy. I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't that way, but
Okay, so no, I'm going to diverge a little bit from Crystal here, right? Yes, the United States is set up currently for a two-party duopoly, and that generally a strong third party on your side of the aisle is going to contribute towards the loss of your side by splitting the vote up. That's true. However, given the historic weak point of the Democratic Party right now, I don't even trust that it can survive. And so it's either going to need to be taken over, which is what Crystal Ball is going to suggest here. And sure, if you can do that, that's a viable option. But there's a chance that you can't do that. Because parties are not democratic. They're not part of the federal government. They're private clubs. And they're designed to ensconce certain interests and keep them in place. And so if the Democratic Party is ultimately unwilling to change, I mean, it's a rough thing to say, but by hook or by crook, a better party needs to emerge. Whether that's a new, whether that's new leadership for the Democratic Party, and I mean totally new leadership. I mean a Democratic Party where the Clintons do not feel welcome. That kind of, the Clintons say this is too left wing for me, right? Or a, third party rises up to supplant it. Now that's a rough road right there, because parties take a long time to codify, to come into their own, and to be successful electorally. But like I'm saying, we may not be left with a choice. There is every chance that the old guard in the Democratic Party hangs on to power, and in that case, something needs to be done. Calculations can be made come election time as to whether a third party is going to, ultimately have a positive effect on the electoral outcome or a negative electoral effect. But as far as as far as there needing to be third parties to, at the very least push the Democratic Party left, that's, I think, a necessity.
Ranked choice voting just got beaten even more badly than the Democratic Party in state referendums. I wish it wasn't true. The most credible third-party candidate, Dr. Jill Stein, she got less than 1% of the vote. It wasn't even enough votes for Dems to try to blame her and call her a spoiler. The only electoral vehicle for opposing Trumpism is the Democratic Party. Number two, the Democratic Party itself is in danger of extinction as meaningful opposition. Everyone who's been steering the ship over the past 8 years, they should all be fired. Every brain-dead consultant contract terminated. And crucially, the working class must be put ahead of the party's donors. Senator Chris Murphy, to my surprise, actually got a lot right in a recent tweet thread where he wrote in part, when progressives like Bernie aggressively go after the elites that hold people down, they are shunned as dangerous populists. Why? Maybe because true economic populism is bad for our high-income base. Yeah, you think? Now look, Trump is done in 4 years' time. His successors don't have nearly the juice that he does, as evidenced by the fact that he outperformed nearly every Republican in the country. Democrats may have kept the margins close enough in the House and the Senate to stay in the game for now, but it is time for a dramatic turnaround, or that 400 Electoral College wipeout that Joe Biden was heading for could be just around the next 4-year corner. So, yeah, it's pretty dire for them. And I'm not.
Hey guys, if you want to see what I had to say to Crystal's monologue, not just this one, all of them, going back to the very beginning, become a premium subscriber today.
Oh my God, they're really keeping a lot of stuff paywalled, aren't they? All right, so, oh no, not the X in my name, no! We're back on Sander Hall. All right, so this is a chart of the. Here, let me make it a little bit easier to see. These are political parties in the United States. A little bit smaller. There we go. Okay, I think you can see it all now. Most of it, anyway. All right, so what do we got here? Red Burgundy is nonpartisan. George Washington served 2 terms, and he did not have a political party. Right, that's where that ends. That's where that ends. Green is Democratic Republican. Orange is Federalist.
Because it was so peaceful up here, but now there are freaking communist invading radicals.
So you see the Federalists win the first elections, the first election, very close election with Adams. And then the Democratic Republicans sort of take over after that. And then they just push the Federalists into irrelevancy. You also have, what is this? The National Republican with the light orange. You have the Whig with the yellow. Where's the Whig? The Whig is like these guys up here. And they won in 1840 and 1848. Then you have the Democratic Party separate. National Republican. Okay, National Republican is like kind of peach colored there. You have sort of like Democratic versus the National Republican, and then Democratic versus the Whig Party. And then you have the Republican Party really come into its own with Lincoln. Purple is Bull Moose. So yeah, with the exception of this Bull Moose Party, that's the Teddy Roosevelt Party. After he had been a Republican, I think he drops out and then comes back in as a Bull Moose. But yeah, pretty much from there out, it's Democrat and Republican as far as what's really in contention. Oh wait, this one's other. Okay. So that other is Perot under Clinton, and I don't even know, who did they hand it to after Perot? Maybe Buchanan. But this isn't the graph that I wanted to show you, but it does show you the point that I wanted to illustrate, which is that the 2-party rule is not a steadfast rule. Parties arise, parties disappear, and that could happen again. There was some thought that the Republican Party might be moving towards a period in which it's only viable as a regional party, in which the demographics were moving towards the Democrats under Obama, and that if that trend were to continue, then you'd see the Republican Party just become not viable. But obviously, that's not what happened, because the Democratic Party has its own problems. And its biggest problem is a lack of authenticity, a lack of people believing it, a lack of it sticking with its roots. Down here, we see Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt to Truman, right? And that is after Hoover, whose response to the Great Depression was austerity. Austerity didn't work. Americans didn't like austerity, and they rejected it, empowering Roosevelt. And, because of the socialist parties that were nipping at the heels of the Democrats at that time, Roosevelt did something uncharacteristic, and you know, something that he was considered somewhat of a class traitor. He's a guy that comes from money, but he instituted one of the just kind of an unprecedented social safety net. And that was the promise that got the Democrats not just into power, but even when Eisenhower took over for a couple of years, Eisenhower's top marginal tax rates were like 90%. So Eisenhower was running, more or less New Deal style policies. And without keeping that, and essentially what it is this, right? Now, chat, I should probably let you know, I don't consider myself to be a Democrat. All right? I will vote with the Democrats when I think it is strategic, when it is, a choice between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, right? I think it's worth it to weaponize my vote in that.
$99. Oh, how you forget our very own Donald Trump took over the Reform Party after Ross.
Really? Oh, wait, somebody's mentioned this before. That Donald Trump had some dalliance with the Reform Party, as did Jesse Ventura and Pat Buchanan. It's a really strange big tent, the Reform Party. But thank you for the super chat. But yeah, like, I don't ultimately, my values are in line with the workers, not with the capitalist class. And both the Republican and the Democratic Party are parties of, for, and by the capitalist class at the end of the day. The difference is that the Republicans seek to enact the policies of austerity, in other words, going hard on the working class, and the Democrats seek to enact policies of, either like a, New Deal or a Keynesian variety. In other words, economic stimulus from the bottom up, which both benefits the wealthy and also keeps any sort of social instability from dislodging these two capitalist parties as the as the centers of power, right? And so, as far as electoral politics, I do feel like there's times when, voting for the Democrats to defeat the Republicans is worthwhile, because I do want people's material conditions to be taken care of, and they are taken care of better under a New Deal regime, under a social safety net, and with more of the Keynesian ideal rather than the supply side ideal championed by people like Ronald Reagan. But in terms of the Democrats' success, it's incumbent upon the deal. What is the deal? The deal is you're a worker, you're working for capitalists, and they are taking your surplus value. And that sucks. But FDR said, workers, if you will put up with having your surplus value taken from you, I will make sure that when your company makes more money, that you get a piece of that pie. You get a piece of the action. That's essentially what the New Deal is. And through this period of FDR to Reagan, right? Through these 40 years between FDR and Reagan, we see as the productivity of the American worker increases, so does the wage. When we get to Reagan, that stops and it flattens out. The productivity continues to increase and the pay rate remains flat. Right? Now, that was enacted, there's things that Carter did to deindustrialize. Carter is our first neoliberal president. But it's really gets going under Reagan. The problem is that after Reagan, after getting beaten by an actor twice, somebody that everybody thought was too extreme, somebody that nobody took seriously, honestly, a lot like Trump in a way, the Democrats became afraid of their own shadow. What's their own shadow? FDR. FDR, they were afraid of that. They were like, we can't be FDR anymore. There was a time in where they started to call Democrats who, you know, had a New Deal mentality, they started to call them Eleanors, right? As after the wife of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, they would call you an Eleanor if you were like that, and you're supposed to get with the neoliberal consensus like Carter did, like Clinton did, like Obama did. But in doing that, in pivoting, in becoming Republican light, the Democratic Party has broken its promise, has broken that social contract, and thus lost its identity and lost the trust of the American people. And that's why I question whether the Democratic Party can get that trust back, or whether it would be better off reforming as something else. I don't know. I mean, we're gonna figure out a lot of things in the next 4 years. But anyway, let's get back to this.
In the wake of Kamala's stunning defeat, Democrats have been studiously passing around various charts and data points to try to make sense of it all. Here's a regression analysis of voter preferences in 7 key states. Here's a graph mapping ideological leanings versus district overperformance compared to Kamala and Biden. Here's a heat map of the precincts where Trump accumulated the largest 8-year improvement correlated with income decile. Listen, I get it. I've done the same. I'm a little A student, teacher's pet type, and I too would like to plot, chart, and data analyze my way to the one correct answer for how Democrats should look, walk, talk, and act. But to be honest with you, that shit needs to stop because it utterly misses how politics actually works.
Simric says, I think the GOP will split after Trump dies. Okay, now I don't want you taking that as copium, right? Like, don't take that for granted, okay? But you might be right. You might be right. There's a possibility, and I think the best outcome of this tumultuous 4 years that we're about to go through is that both major parties die and are replaced by something better. I think that's the best that we can hope for. This is a time of chaos. This is a time of danger. Danger within the country, danger to the world.
Because it was so peaceful up here, but now there are freaking communist invading radicals.
And there is every chance that not just the Republican Party ends up crashing on those rocks, like Kemrick said, but that the Democratic Party as well. Like, right, we could definitely see.
Because it was so peaceful up here, but now there are freaking communist invading radicals.
And you know, the right track, wrong track shit, I don't think that's just like Republican Democrat anymore. I think that people have looked at the country as being on the wrong track since like the 2008 financial crisis. And there's just been a lack of recognition from either party what that actually means. Yeah.
In fact, this type of focus group, poll-driven, laundry list approach to politics is exactly what Democrats already do, and you can see precisely how that's worked out. In fact, Kamala ran the platonic ideal of this approach, which has been dubbed popularism. Now, the guy who popularized popularism, David Shore, he actually ran a $700 million super PAC for the Kamala campaign. The basic idea is you pull a bunch of policies, you pick what's most popular, and you run on it. And like a good little centrist, Kamala eschewed all divisive talk of race or gender. She spent the entire campaign running around with Republicans to convince everyone she didn't actually really stand for anything. She embraced the GOP position on the border. She talked endlessly about how she prosecuted transnational gangs and argued the problem with Trump's border policy was that he didn't construct enough of his vaunted border wall. Seriously. As Jon Stewart argued, though, far from running a woke campaign, Kamala and Democrats obsessively tried to pander to the polls and adopted Republican framing.
I only have one problem with the woke theory. I just didn't recall seeing any Democrats running on woke shit. These were the commercials I saw for the Democrats.
Sherrod Brown is working to fix our border crisis.
Mondaire Jones is working to secure our border.
Notice anything about these Democratic ads? Do they feel like Democratic ads? Or do they feel like Republican ads?
Is restoring order at our southern border.
I'm Laura Gillen, and I'm here at the border of Nassau County. We're 2,000 miles from Mexico, but we're feeling the migrant crisis almost every day.
We can't let China steal Wisconsin jobs.
Benefits for illegal immigrants? No way. Blocking support for white farmers?
What?
I mean, look at me.
Standing with law enforcement against defunding
Yeah, look at him.
the police.
I've owned a gun my whole life.
Let me be clear. I don't want boys playing girl sports.
You all know me. I've never pushed
This is pandering, and it didn't fucking work.
for sex changes.
Well, that's just a weird one at the end there. And don't.
So yeah, you're almost like implying that the Democrats are advocating that people get sex changes.
Forget about Kamala Harris. It's not like she was.
Yeah, is this South Africa? What are we doing, right, Shakespeare?
Exactly
What are we
an
doing?
NPR tote bag.
I have a Glock.
They didn't do the woke thing. They tried. They acted like Republicans for the last 4 months. They wore camo hats and went to Cheney family reunions. Do you know how dangerous it is to wear a hunting hat around Cheney?
Kamala's campaign could have been designed by a centrist AI fed reams of focus group data, poll-tested messaging, world's most lethal military, opportunity economy, coalition of Liz Cheney, Taylor Swift, and Bernie Sanders. As Edinger Mentum points out over on Twitter, quote, the way people are talking, you would never have known.
Wait, Dublin Patterson is saying if it didn't work, oh my God, Dublin, thank you for illustrating my point. Now, one thing that you might not have recognized, so I'm just going to double back on this and make sure you understand it. Those were Democratic ads, Dublin. That was Democrats. That was Democrats. That's what didn't work. Democrats lost, in case you weren't keeping score at home, right? Those were Democratic ads. They felt like Republican ads. And you're not going to win an election by being like, oh, hey, I'm like Diet Republican or something. I'm just like the Republicans. I may be a Democrat. I may have a Democrat. Yeah, exactly. That's what's wild. They caved. They pandered. And this is why Americans don't trust the Democratic Party. Because it's like, who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? Those were Democratic ads. Yeah. I know, it's easy to miss. They felt like Republican ads.
Central pillar of the Democratic campaign strategy was bringing up the border bill that Trump shot down. This was very much the first post-wokeness Democratic campaign. It was run by a party whose top people read Matt Iglesias and gave $700 million to a PAC heavily influenced by David Shore. For this wing to act like Cassandra's is beyond absurd. And I would add that she and Biden routinely took every opportunity to castigate lefty college kids for their campus activism, smearing the prototypical pink-haired college kids who happen to be opposing a genocide as raging anti-Semites. What's more, during the campaign, the popularism centrists, they all thought this campaign was going great. They loved the Liz Cheney strategy.
Again, the Democrats and the Republicans are private clubs, right? Anybody looking to either of these parties for moral guidance, you're going to be sorely missing, right? They're literally private clubs. You know, they're clout organizations, right? They're influence wielders. There's no center there. There's no core there. There's no real ideology even there. Just pure power politics.
Here is Jonathan Chait
And that's what our politics is missing. Anything real, anything human, anything sincere is missing.
New York Magazine. He says the race is close because Harris is running a brilliant campaign. Stop complaining. The centrism is working. But of course, even when Democrats run exactly as Chait, Iglesias, and co. won, there's always some person out there existing in the world and being woke that they can blame for elite Democratic failures and working class abandonment. Now, I don't think it's fair to lay all the blame for Kamala's loss at her feet, but certainly she gets some of the blame.
I'm going to take a pee really quick. I'll be right back.
For this bloodless, paint-by-numbers style of politics. It has failed, routinely and now completely. And their capitulation in Republican framing is already a moral and political catastrophe. The core of Kamala's approach, and that of Biden, the bulk of establishment politics, is to avoid controversy and avoid division. If an issue polls under 60%, avoid it. If a previous position drops in support, abandon it. Studiously avoid saying anything that might, God forbid, create a backlash. This approach is wrong. It's brain dead. It's idiotic. As is the saying that politics is about addition. Wrong. Winning politics that can also deliver anything worthwhile is divisive. The only thing that really matters is getting that division correct. Think about Trump, for God's sakes. He is the single most divisive politician of the modern era, without a doubt. He is also the most successful. He deeply understands his divisive politics, and everything he says and does effectively drives towards the division that serves his political interests and message. On one side are the migrants, Democrats, and cultural elites who, in his narrative, want to destroy your town, steal your job, and indoctrinate your kids. On the other side is anyone who supports Trump against these forces, and Trump alone is, of course, the politician who can fix the problem. Another divisive politician? Bernie. Now, he stylistically, of course, quite different from Trump, but make no mistake, his fundamentally is a divisive politics. In the language of Occupy, it's the 99% versus the 1%. It's the millionaires and billionaires versus everyone else. Throw in the corporate media, the corrupt establishment, and you've got all you need for a winning, fruitful, divisive politics. Think about it. If you did your little checklist politics telling how popular Kamala's policies are versus Trump's policies, Kamala would win every time. Democrats would sweep 40 states as evidenced by the fact that paid sick leave, abortion rights, and high minimum wages were passed in deep red states like Missouri. But that is not remotely how politics actually works. Democratic pollster Celinda Lake made this point when she explained the difference in how voters saw Trump and Kamala's economic policies. Quote, everybody knows what Trump economics is: China, tariffs, tax cuts. Then you go to them and ask, what are Democratic economics? And someone will make a joke about welfare, and half the people can't name anything. It is nothing like the Republican brand. Now, this isn't because Democrats had a failed ad strategy. There's some evidence their ad and ground game actually were kind of effective. It's because they have zero narrative. They have failed to create the right divisive politics. And if you don't relentlessly explain your story of the world, your goals, principles, heroes, and villains, your opponents, they will happily fill in the blanks. Ergo, she's for they, them, he's for you. So what would a better strategy look like? Well, it looks like Bernie's 2016 class versus populism, but on steroids. Democrats need to abandon a bland and offensive unity between the Cheneys and AOC and embrace a division that aggressively excises everyone who puts the billionaires' interests over the working class. There should be purity tests on everything that is core to that war against the plutocrats, and a large public purge of those who are on the wrong side of that divide. If you don't agree that billionaires should be abolished, then get the fuck out. If you don't want to tax the rich, get the fuck out. If you don't want to radically increase union power, get the fuck out. If you don't want to implement a universal jobs guarantee, get out. If you don't want universal health care, get out. If you do support these things, but you also have a more moderate position on abortion, guns, trans athletes, okay, there can be a space for you here. But these cultural issues can never be central. They are distractions, because to claim them as central is to
Okay, so like what she just said, I like low-key disagree with that. But it's on a... Look, if people are coming into the party with bigoted views, you got to push back against that. You got to push back against that. There's no need to purge anybody from the party, right? In terms of the neoliberals, what's needed is to push the party far enough where the neoliberals leave by themselves.
Communist invading radicals.
And honestly, they can find a place with these zero constituency neocons, right? Neoliberal, neoconservative, these are old ideologies that don't really represent anybody. There's not like a constituency there. There's not a core of people that are like really hardcore, just like love neoliberalism. Just like there's nobody that really hardcore, like, you know, loves neoconservatism. This is, but yeah, no, like when you say like, you know, okay, well, there's a place for you in here. Well, yeah, there's a place for you, but you're going to get disagreement, right? You're going to be, people are going to advocate, you know, if you come in here with any kind of bigotry, you're going to get pushback, right? But if you care about workers, if you care about their material conditions more than you care about your, you know, weird thoughts about trans people, or you know, whatever other bigotry that you're bringing in, then, you know, yeah, you know, vote vote D, I guess, or whatever party we end up with.
The correct divisive frame and undercut the narrative. The war is not between immigrants and Americans. The war is between the plutocrats and the people. Immigrant and trans panics, those are ploys to keep regular people divided against each other instead of against the corrupt.
And you know, if the Democratic Party does its job as far as, you know, that social contract, if the Democratic Party, you know, maintains a certain like living standard for working people, there's going to be a lot less energy for demagogues to demagogue and demonize marginalized groups. That doesn't mean that we don't still have to, you know, fight, advocate, but people should naturally be prioritizing their own well-being over over hurting the proverbial other. I feel like I missed something here. Is it okay if I roll her back?
Democratic economics, and someone will make a joke about welfare and half the people can't name anything. It is nothing like the Republican brand. Now, this isn't because Democrats had a failed ad strategy. There's some evidence their ad and ground game actually were kind of effective. It's because they have zero narrative. They have failed.
So the biggest problem with like welfare, quote unquote, is that people don't feel entitled to it. And you actually are. If what you call welfare or a social safety net comes from taxes, and those taxes have been clawed back from capitalists that are squeezing you for your surplus, that's your money. You're not taking anybody's money. You're not getting anything for free. And the challenge for a left party is to find a way to not only get people's shit back for them, to claw back not just money, but also leverage for the working class. One of the challenges is to convince the working class that this is your shit. You made this economy, you made this value, you made the wealth that the rich are enjoying. You're not taking it away from them. They didn't work hard for it. You know, if you work for your money and you know how hard it is to save $5,000, right? And you see somebody that's earning, you know, millions of dollars a year, and you treat that millions of dollars a year income that's coming from not their own work, but the work from others. If you treat that as, well, God, it was hard to save $5,000. What must it be like to save? That's a really hardworking person. They must be really smart. They must be contributing a lot. They must be job creators. No, they're exploiters. They're exploiters. And the very least you can ask for your government, from your government, is to give back some of what's been exploited from you.
To create the right divisive politics. And if you don't relentlessly explain your story of the world, your goals, principles, heroes, and villains, your opponents, they will happily fill in the blanks. Ergo, she's for they, them, he's for you. So what would a better strategy look like? Well, it looks like Bernie's 2016 class versus populism, but on steroids. Democrats need to abandon a bland and offensive unity between the Cheneys and AOC and embrace a division that aggressively excises everyone who puts the billionaires' interests.
The Cheneys and AOC. Okay, so what I think what she's reacting to is the fact that AOC was one of the
It was so peaceful up here, but now there are freaking communist invading radicals.
I think she's reacting to the fact that AOC was supportive of Biden, right? And that part, it
was so peaceful up here, but now
I don't know if that part's been explained. Now, while I have been let down by the likes of Bernie Sanders and AOC, particularly on the Gaza issue,
but now there are freaking communist invading radicals,
and you know, and especially by Biden, AOC's concerns that she expressed when Biden was being pushed out were along the lines that she was afraid that the Democratic establishment was going to use this as an opportunity to seize power back from Biden, who had been good on issues like the NLRB, who had, put Lena Khan in, and it was just going to be replaced by Clintonites and Obamaites, right? And Biden, for the record, was more progressive than Clinton or Obama by leaps and bounds. And there was some kind of strange synergy going on between like your Bernie Sanders and your AOCs and Biden. Now, that being said, Biden's Gaza policy was inexcusable. A lot of the ways that Biden went about some of his policies, such as student loan forgiveness, almost made it seem like he didn't really believe in those issues, right? There was a route to forgive student loans before the courts had anything to say about it, but Biden didn't choose that route because it was considered more radical. But yeah, there's a little bit more complexity in terms of this, so I'm not so sure I'm on board with the party of the AOC. Like that, there was some kind of I wouldn't hold AOC responsible for Kamala's decision to stop talking about price gouging and stop talking about like kitchen table issues in order to appeal more to suburban voters and to Republican voters, right? I'm not sure if that's something I'd put on AOC with the caveat that I am not entirely, in agreement with everything that AOC and Bernie have done lately. So
over the working class. There should be purity tests on everything that is core to that war against the plutocrats and a large public purge of those who are on the wrong side of that divide.
See, I mean, I don't think you need a purge. There's no, you can't purge, right? If somebody wants to run as a Democrat, look at Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang is not a Democrat, and yet he ran as one. Look at RFK Jr. RFK Jr. is a fucking right-wing weirdo, and he ran as a Democrat. You can't stop that. They're gonna run, right? You can't purge anybody from the party. We're not fucking Stalin over here, right? We're not. There's no purging, right? The only purge that happens is if the party is in agreement and they move towards something incredibly economically progressive. They move towards a massive raise in the minimum wage. They move towards support of unions. You're going to push the shitlibs, the neolibs out, right? That's the only purge there is that they kind of they leave the party when they realize that it's not in the line with the corporate interests.
If you don't agree that billionaires should be abolished, then get the fuck out. If you don't want to tax the rich, get the fuck out.
Would I say that I'm a progressive? I would say I'm beyond progressive, right?
If you don't want to radically increase union power, get the fuck out. If you don't want to implement a universal jobs guarantee,
I would say that being progressive only describes a part of my politics, and the other aspect of it is off the spectrum as far as the Democratic Republican divide. In other words, when I look at the FDR administration, when I look at the New Deal, I say that's a good start, but a stronger prescription is needed.
Get out. If you don't want universal health care, get out. If you do support these things, but you also have a more moderate position on abortion, guns, trans athletes, okay, there can be a space for you here. But these cultural issues...
It's a weird thing to say abortion there. It's a weird, what constituency is there for pro-life? Oh no, we need to make sure to include pro-lifers in the Democratic Party, right? It's just, honestly, like I said, I'm not, I don't think that there is any purging. I don't think you can eliminate people from your party. I think that you can move decisively in a direction that will be unappealing to the, oh my God, what was the name of Kamala's brother-in-law that came in? The Mark Cubans of the world, in other words, the Liz Cheneys of the world will not want to be part of your coalition, right? That you can do that, but you can't, in other words, you couldn't be like, hey, Liz Cheney, don't endorse me. don't endorse. You're going to endorse Trump. Okay, Liz Cheney. No, I don't want, no, you can't refuse an endorsement. Somebody gives you an endorsement, they gave you the endorsement. What you can avoid doing is campaigning with Liz Cheney. And Kamala should have done that.
Can never be central. They are distractions because to claim them as central is to void the correct divisive frame and undercut the narrative. The war is not between immigrants and Americans. The war is between the plutocrats and the people. Immigrant and trans panics, those are ploys to keep regular people divided against each other instead of against the corrupt political, media, and economic elite who have rigged the system and hogged all the spoils. Elon Musk is out there running around crying about trans people and migrants existing because he wants another giant taxpayer subsidy and an even bigger tax cut. He does not have your best interest.
Yeah, it is true that the demonization of marginalized groups is a strategy to divide and conquer, and it distracts you from your material conditions. And the voters that we can't necessarily win over on social issues can be appealed to on pocketbook issues, on kitchen table issues. And at the end of the day, that is more likely what they're going to care about than, fucking over the other, fucking over somebody that they don't recognize the humanity of, right? Wanting to wanting to punish immigrants, wanting to punish racial minorities, wanting to punish sexual minorities, etc., right? Will be a lot less appealing to somebody whose material conditions are taken care of. That doesn't mean that reactionary impetus isn't there. It just means that it's not going to be as strong in the face of a Democratic Party that actually gives the working class what they need.
Interests, or those of the country for that matter, in mind. Bernie explained this all perfectly in a classic clip, of course, which has recently resurfaced. Take a listen.
Now, if you had an agenda...
Now, chat was telling me about this the other day, although I guess you didn't do a good job of describing like where to look for it or something. I actually couldn't find this by itself. I think Kyle Kulinski's done a couple of videos on this. Obviously, Crystal's including this here. This is from C-SPAN 2. This is Bernie talking to a class of college students. But this is pretty amazing. This is actually...
like that, and you went before the American people. Tax breaks for the rich. Destruction of Medicare. Destruction of Social Security, as we know it. Lowering the minimum wage or abolishing it. How many votes do you think you'd get? Not a whole lot. Maybe the richest 1% would vote for you. But that's not a lot of votes. So what do? I've got a problem. You package it. How do you package it? And here's, I want you to pay attention to me. Because this is bad stuff. We divide people up by races. Affirmative action becomes one issue. All them black people are getting the jobs that we white people used to have. Split people, work.
If you tell West Virginians they can have health care and keep their guns, you'll win that state by 80%. If you give West Virginians health care and you make sure that they have a good standard of living, they're not gonna need a fucking assault weapon to make them feel like they've got a big dick. You know what I'm saying? That's cope. That shit is cope. Like wanting to carry around like a military grade weapon. Like, I'm gonna protect my family. The person that does that is a person that doesn't feel like they can provide for their family. You give them the means to provide for their family. You make them realize that at least under your party's administration, that the government is not their fucking enemy. Then the need for that fucking weapon that's gonna get used by a school shooter, come on, let's be real. Will go away. That being said, I don't think that under the police, under the fucked up police state that is the United States, I don't think that, something like, a bill which disarms the public is going to be preferentially used against poor and marginalized people. It's going to be used preferentially against minorities, right? In other words, you give a cop a law that says that like these guns aren't allowed. They're not looking in Bubba's like rack on his truck, or maybe they are if Bubba's lives in a poor neighborhood or something like that. But they're more likely to be disarming people who might actually need that to protect themselves. But yeah, that being said, I don't think that, I think that the reason, like Obama said it himself, Americans cling to God and guns. And there's a reason. And Obama won't tell you that reason. Because it would scare the donors if he did. It's because the Democrats have not kept their part of the bargain in the New Deal. That's why. Americans aren't able to take care of themselves.
But now there are freaking communist invading radicals.
Yo, that's a lot of communist invading radicals there. Damn. As Bernie foretold, that it's becoming more and more common. Yeah.
Communist invading radicals.
I want to see a future in which Bernie Sanders is remembered more than Donald Trump.
But now there are freaking communist invading radicals.
Right, Donald Trump was president twice, but Bernie Sanders changed.
So peaceful up here.
Bernie Sanders is the one that changed history.
Working class, white against black. Instead of working together to create decent jobs for all. Those uppity women now, they want the right to choose. We'll split people on the abortion issue. We'll split people up on the gun issue. We'll split people up on religious issues. You follow what I'm saying? So you split people up, and then they end up, if you're a middle-class person, voting against your own interests, and the rich go laughing all the way to the bank. And they succeed with the help of the media. Because the media will not talk about how, in a sense, the common problems that Americans face and how we bring people together. And that's what I believe. I believe that on issues like everybody in this room thinks, I think, that instead of giving tax breaks to the rich, we should increase federal aid to education. Anyone disagree with that? Well, you know what? Most Americans agree with that. All of you think that every American should be entitled to health care. I suspect most of you think we should not have a trade policy which allows corporations to throw American workers out on the street and run to China. Most Americans agree with that. And our job is to bring people together on common interest, and some of these extreme right-wing people. You watch the issues that they talk about. Affirmative action.
Ooh. Yo, Surly Barber, that is one song I haven't seen Trump use at his rallies yet. Cult of Personality. Yeah. It's a great song.
The issue of abortion.
I mean, like, the United States is fucked up, okay, as far as guns goes, and it's already, there's already guns. There's more guns than people in the United States. That's actually an interesting question to interrogate in and of itself. But that being said, that, like, I don't think that, like, disarming people as a policy enacted by police is a good idea. And in other words, the police need to be fixed before the issue of the overabundance of guns in this country can be fixed. Right? The current police are not the institution to do that. The current police are a corrupt criminal gang which traces its roots back to slave patrols and to anti-union thugs. That's the cops that we have right now. And it's not just the people, okay? It's the culture. It's how the people are selected. It's who's selecting the people to become cops, right? That's what we're dealing with right now. And I don't think a lot of people really understood the concept of abolition, of police abolition. They thought it was like abolition of any sort of institution acting on behalf of keeping the peace in society. That's not what that was about. It was that this institution is not doing the job. It's enacted to protect people, and it's preferentially protecting a certain type of people, and it's preferentially harming another type of people. And we can do better. We really got to think of, like, what do you want? What kind of person do you want to protect you? Do you want a high school bully with, like, unexamined implicit bias? Or do you want somebody that understands and cares about the common good and the common decency? Because I swear to God, it doesn't have to be like this. The United States' system of policing is actually just bad.
The question they use to divide. The issue of guns they use to divide. And our job is to say, let's focus on basic economic issues. How do we expand the middle class? This is a great country. Why is it the average American is working longer hours for low wages than 30 years ago? Let's talk about that.
Amen, Bernie. And of course, there is another figure in American history we can look to who understood this politics of division and reaped massive electoral rewards.
Is it the late, great FDR?
Which allowed him to.
Is that what we're talking about?
Social Democratic program, talking, of course, about FDR, who famously welcomed the hatred of those economic royalists who would seek to block his agenda. As friend of the show, Irene Frimpong points out, plan is actually.
They are unanimous in their hatred of me, and I welcome their hatred. Yeah.
Not that complicated, and FDR's Economic Bill of Rights will more than suffice. It reads, every American has the right to, number one, a job.
Okay, so now here's the one place I'd pull away from Crystal, okay? In the United States, we have a tendency to look at certain political officials of old on almost like a divine level, right? We do this with George Washington and the Founding Fathers, and I wouldn't want to replace that with, just venerating FDR. It's important to understand FDR in his complete nuance. Are you seeing?
It was so peaceful up here, but now there are freaking communists invading.
Are you seeing a Democratic Party that is preferable to the Democratic Party of today? Yes, absolutely.
It was so peaceful up here, but now there are freaking communists invading radicals.
But you're also seeing a Democratic Party which had not distanced itself from the states' rights bullshit and from the South, right? It's a little bit more complicated than people realize. And you're also not seeing somebody who's doing something for the good of the American people, but rather somebody who's been pushed by socialists, but been pushed by leftists, been pushed by people to his left to preserve not only the Democratic Party, but capitalism. And look what he does to preserve capitalism, right? This is actually a good outcome. This is actually a good outcome. Is it the best outcome? No. Is it durable? No. You can see that, right? It only took till Reagan to dislodge this mentality. This was the rule from the 40s to the 70s. But yeah, it didn't last. It didn't last, right? So it shows us that that's not a strong enough prescription, but it's in the right direction. It's in the right direction. And anytime that a left party can push a center party like the Democrats, a capitalist party like the Democrats, to enact measures that improve the workers' material conditions, even if it's to save capitalism from itself, that is a good day. I want working people to have enough.
Communist invading radicals.
But you can't let this shit make you complacent. And unfortunately, because of this and the Red Scare and the Cold War, Americans did let it make them complacent. But yeah, it's a good start. It's a good start.
Number two, an adequate wage and decent living. Number three, a decent home. Number four, medical care. Number five, economic protection during sickness, accident, old age, or unemployment. Number six, a good education. That's it.
And this was never passed, all right? So there were two measures that FDR proposed. One was the New Deal, the Fair Deal, the Square Deal, right? And that's the social contract that I keep on talking about. Is it perfect? No. But again, it's better than what was in place. And the second was the Economic Bill of Rights. And this never got, you can see Social Security is kind of covered in number 5. A lot of this stuff didn't get implemented, but some of it did.
That's the program. Simple to understand, impossible to actually achieve with the current donor-beholden leadership of the Democratic Party. Probably the only hope is someone to come in like a bull in a china shop from the outside, like what Donald Trump did. Even Bernie was ultimately way too nice to these people. And since the program is actively hostile to capital, the capital class will wage a far more aggressive fight than they really mustered against Trump. It is more likely the Democrats take the advice of those who are rushing to throw trans people, immigrants, whoever, under the bus and simply capitulate to Trump's narrative. Many already have, in fact. This path may even be electorally viable in the same way that Democrats became viable after Bill Clinton adopted Reaganite neoliberal framing. But I don't care.
Remember, the initial viability of the Democratic Party. What's up, One Great Earth? Thank you for the raid. The initial viability of the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton was made possible not by Bill Clinton and not by his great, Republican light bullshit act, but by Ross Perot and splitting the right-wing vote up.
Democrats winning ultimately. I care about delivering meaningful improvements for working class people, avoiding wars, and keeping our democracy. Donor-friendly capitulation is a plan to avoid even joining the fight. Sagar, the Jon Stewart clip, enjoyed that.
Hey guys, if you want to see what I had to say.
All right, there you go. There's your political content for the night. If you've joined us on YouTube Shorts, realize that the stream is not ending, although the Shorts stream will be ending. We're going to continue what we're doing here on the full scale stream. I will link you to that stream right now. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed to my channel. I appreciate that greatly. Thank you also if you liked my stream. That helps me out a lot. Thank you for all the support that you give me, whether through Patreon or Super Chat or whatever. It's the only way I'm able to keep this going is through your support. So thank you so much. If you want to join us on the other side, because we're going to be talking tonight, I guess, about Destiny and Lonerbox and their weird contempt, jealousy, and hatred for Hassan Piker, along with the expose on both of these figures as far as their anti-Palestinian grift goes, then you can join us. And I've given you the link there. I've in the pinned comment, you can click on that to join us over there. You don't have to. Yeah, I'm not telling you what to do, but if you want to join us over there, do that. Also, I think the stream will maybe try to raid you into it, so you might find yourself in the full scale stream. When I say the full scale stream, I mean like full screen stream, right? It's like it's not like vertical, it's like horizontal. So that's where we're going to continue doing the stream. And if you want to join us, you're more than welcome. If not, it's been a great night, and I appreciate your support. I appreciate your viewership, and look for more stuff in the future. We'll be here. All right. I'm gonna end this stream and hear a tale of the